Welcome, everyone. I appreciate you taking some time here. And I know we have a lot of questions, so I'm happy to answer those. I think it would be helpful to start with what we've been working on since last week when the offer sheets came in, give you a little bit of perspective on our thought process that went into the decision, and then happy to turn it over and open it up to questions. So last week when the offer sheets came in, we got to work as a staff and we met, and our objective was to really focus on where we were at that point in time and look at all of the different options that were available to us. We didn't rule anything out right away. We sort of went down the path, and the way we looked at it, we had essentially four options. I guess you could say that the first would be to match both offer sheets. The second would be to match Broberg, not match Holloway. The third would have been the inverse, match Holloway, not Broberg. And then the fourth would have been to not match either one. So we spent a lot of time, like multiple days, going through what each of those scenarios would look like, both in the immediate term for this year's team, the shorter term, which is this trade deadline and off season, and even longer term. And what we tried to do was to come up with how our team would look under each scenario, and we play that out, and eventually what we did was decided which one just made the most sense from where we were today, not really looking back in time as to what happened previous. Like, this is where we were as of last Tuesday. So I thought the staff did a fantastic job. We really took our time analyzing and evaluating the different options, and in the process of doing so, when we would come up with things to investigate further, that was when I had a number of phone calls over the last week with most teams in the league, trying to see if there was what they were trying to do with their roster, if they were trying to move any players out, or if they were trying to add any players to the mix. So we exhausted all opportunities, and at the end of the day, we ended up where we are today, which is we did not match either offer sheet. And I think the simplest way to put it would be, we looked at the opportunities, and it's really not reflective of the players at all. I guess I want to be clear on that. It's not that I had any concerns about the players or anything. This came down to a business decision relative to our short-term as well as long-term viability for our roster with the salary cap. So, in doing that, we were able to do some other transactions because, once we decided that we weren't going to match the offer sheets, obviously we knew that we were going to be getting some assets back. So we started having other conversations, and the goal, when you put this whole situation together, we feel like we've been able to accomplish a few things, which gives us a lot of flexibility and options moving forward. And I think that was important for us. We weren't painting ourselves down just one and only one pathway for this season. So we made those subsequent moves to be able to bring in a couple young players, as well as additional draft pick, additional prospect. So I think when you look at it in the totality of it, you realize that we're faced with a challenging situation, but I thought we moved forward with the best series of transactions to put us in a good spot heading into training camp. So with that, I will be happy to turn it over and open up any questions.
Thank you, Stan. We'll start with Mark Spector, Sportsnet.
Hi, Stan. Mark Spector here.
Hi, Mark.
Thank you. How are you?
Good.
I would say, how are you a better team? And has this does this paint a picture of a cup challenging team that's going to try to get older players on short-term contracts? Does this allow you roster flexibility to sign more players the way Henrique, the way Brown, the way Janmark were signed in the last season?
Well, good question, Mark. And I think there's a couple of ways to look at that. Certainly, if you look at the way that went, it was nice to see that the Oilers are a destination for players that are in a different, focused more so on trying to find a championship as opposed to, each player is different and they're at different points in their career. But I think certainly it was obvious that the players that chose to come to Edmonton and likely leave money on the table, it's because they see something in our group and they want to be part of that. So that's something that's great, and we certainly hope that continues. And that's a goal for our team. And the way to make that a reality in future years is to have a competitive team where players around the league look and they say, "I'm looking to win, and that's where I want to be." I think. I wouldn't say we're only looking at older players. I think there's a benefit with older players. They come with a certain set of experience, and they've been in a bunch of different situations. So there's value in that. But we also brought a couple young players into the organization as well, who are, they have NHL experience, but they're trying to establish themselves as everyday NHLers in Podkolzin and Ty Emberson. So I don't think you have to. It's not an either or situation. I think it's there's certainly benefit in having young players in your lineup, and that's something that they bring a different mix. There's usually a little bit more energy, excitement. They haven't experienced the NHL, or they haven't been here for a number of years. So having younger players we're not averse to that by any means. So I think it's probably going to be a combination of both. I think what I would say is the key common element to those players and Podkolzin and Emberson is manageable salary cap hits, because with where our team is, not only in the current state but going into the future, salary cap room is going to be imperative for us, and flexibility. So typically young players and veteran players are usually where there's lower cap hits, and then in between there tends to be where the contracts go higher.
My follow-up would be, as you went down all the roads and did all your discovery on every one of these avenues, did it just seem impossible to allow two younger players, who I would say are not core players yet, dictate your salary cap plan to the degree that they would have had you matched them?
Maybe clarify that last part. Them dictating.
My point is, as a guy who's in charge of getting a bunch of really important players signed in the next couple of years, was it impossible for you to allow that plan to deviate at the behest of two young players who've taken a lot more money than you expected to pay them?
Yeah, I think I go back to my opening comments, which we were evaluating the situation that we were in when those offer sheets came in. And given that, as well as the other constraints that we have, we didn't feel like it was the right move to essentially limit our optionality moving forward, not only this year, but in the future. So it's less about the players and their abilities and their talents. It's really about trying to set ourselves up in the best position that we can be, so that we have some options. We're sitting here in August, and there's going to be ups and downs to every team every season, and you're going to have to navigate that. You don't know what your rosters, which players are going to perform well, which ones may not. So you want to be able to adapt if possible. And I think the other scenarios, which was either matching both or matching either one of them, would have put us in a much different position salary cap for this current season, let alone future years. So for that reason, we did what we did.
Thank you for that, Stan. I know Ryan can put his hand up, but is texting me, so we'll go to Ryan Rashog of TSN next. Thank you.
Hey, Stan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So you sort of laid out the cap case for making these decisions. I just wonder from a hockey standpoint, a team that went to game 7 of a cup final will have similar expectations heading into this season. As you analyze your blue line and weigh those off against where you want this team to get to, how do you feel about your blue line given, CC in his 19 plus minutes and Broberg was, I think, 15 and change in the playoffs? Like, you've lost a couple pretty key components here. How do you feel about your blue line?
We have, Ryan. That's true, and that's something that we want to make sure that we have a strong defensive group by the time we get into the stretch run. So I do think we have a lot of options at this point, and we have players that we're optimistic that they're going to be able to come in and fill a role for us. So it's true, we don't have the same mixture that we did in game 7 a couple months ago. So one of the things that we want to do is give them a chance to show us, we have some new defensemen between Stetcher, he's not new in the sense, but he didn't really get a lot of opportunity late last season. And then we have Brown and we also have Emberson. So there's 3 new players there that we have to give an opportunity to show us that they can be valuable and pick up some of those minutes. Because it's true, we do have a different group than we did. And we're hopeful that some of those can emerge and take on larger roles. But the other thing, which I've mentioned a couple times now, is this situation gives us more opportunity to hopefully be able to accrue some cap space and be in the mix if the situation calls for it and we want to make an addition to our team down the road. Then that opportunity could be possible under this scenario.
Follow up. How optimistic are you that you'll be able to get Leon Draisaitl done to a long-term extension, and any update on how that's going?
Yeah, I mean, I was expecting that question, and I'm understandably so. There's a lot of interest in Leon, and so I'll say that we have begun our conversations with Leon and his agent. Beyond that, I don't want to comment on it. My experience over the years has been it's best to keep those between the agent, and out of fairness to Leon and his agent, I think it's best for us to, I'm not characterizing them any way. You shouldn't read anything negative into that. I just don't want to try to put timelines on it or whatnot. We have begun the process, and as it plays out and we have an update, we will certainly reach out and let everybody know.
Bob Stauffer, 630 Ched, go ahead.
Hi, Stan. I'll follow a bit on what you discussed there about the option to accrue. I think one of the perceptions out there is, are there or are there not options with Evander Kane? And so maybe if we could get a bit of an update right now, if there is an update on where we're at with Evander. He obviously played a large percentage of last season and most of the playoffs through injuries.
Yeah, sure, Bob. I think that is probably a good question. I should clarify a few things. So I think there is maybe a slight misunderstanding about how this all works relative to injured players and long-term injury and replacing their cap hit and whatnot. So I'll try to give a brief summary here. So when there's an injured player like Evander is in this case, his moving forward plan is going to be between Evander and the doctors. Like, I don't have any say so in that, nor should I. The most important thing for me is to support Evander and making sure that he gets healthy. So I think when there's any injury, there's a couple options that come into play. You get treatment for it, you do rehab, and over time that injury heals and players able to return to play. Sometimes you have injuries where surgery is required, right away, where it's obvious that's the only solution. And then you have another type of injury where it's not as black and white. You know, there's a few different ways that a player can move forward with it, and that's his decision. And you know, we're going to be supportive of Evander in that. So I think that third scenario is where things are right now. So whether he's going to be out for a little bit of the season, or if he needed surgery, a longer part of the season, we don't have that information. Like, I don't weigh in on that, and that's something that he's going to sort through with the doctors. And I think the reason that's relevant to this discussion would be the impression that because he is injured, then he just goes on long-term injury and you don't need to make trades, or it's not a problem. That's not really accurate, in the sense that you do need to account for that player in your salary cap. Either, you know, he's going to be off LTI and just part of your normal team capture, or if he is going to be out for, you know, longer than 24 days and 10 games, he can go on long-term injury. But he needs to be, you need to, as a team, to be able to activate him when he returns from that injury. So, you know, that's something that came into a lot of our discussions was, you may be able to start the season in long-term injury if that's the case, and he's going to be out at least a month. But we have to have a game plan for when he's healthy and ready to play. And that was much more problematic. And the other thing I'll mention is, with long-term injury, you don't accrue any cap space. So if you're using long-term injury for a few months, and then, you know, you come out of it and you activate the player, you're starting with no cap space and you're trying to build it up. So you're not going to be able to build up a lot in just a month or so. So these were all factors that went into our decision. So the way we're situated right now, we're going to be able to start the season with Evander Kane not being on any type of injury. He'll just be like everyone else. And if he's able to play right away, that's great. If he's not, then we're not going to have a problem making room for him when he's healthy.
And the second question is, obviously, Chris Knobloch coached Emerson. Jeremy Colton worked for you. You know, he had put Colson. But what can you tell us about, you know, sort of the background information on the prospect Fisher that you acquired today? And do you have some more additional? I think he's from Chicago, isn't he?
Yeah, I can talk about all three of those players just to give everyone a little bit of a background. You're right. You know, one of the things we do when we're in these situations this last week is we reach out to all of our staff and any connections they may have had with these players that are being brought up in my conversations with other teams. And in the case of Emerson, I did talk to Chris. You know, he's very familiar with Ty, and he was very complimentary of his game. You know, he loved having him on his team in Hartford. He was a very effective player for him. So I think that's always important when there's a comfort level with your coach and a player that you're bringing in. That's not usually the case. Like, there's not too often when they've coached them elsewhere. So I think that was helpful in that part of it. Podkolzin, you know, obviously he was a high pick, you know, 10th overall. So he's got a pedigree, and he had a strong rookie year in the NHL. And then since that point, it hasn't been the same. He's been in the American League most of the time since then. And, you know, they've had some changes there with, you know, a different regime came in. And, you know, I think we've all seen that. We've all seen players that, for whatever reason, that, you know, things change and it doesn't work for them. And, you know, this is not disparaging anyone. So a lot of times it's on the player or the situation. It's not really anybody's fault, but really like the work we did on Podkolzin and his, I guess, overall skill set, because I think he's certainly got the ability to score. He's got a dimensional shot, but he's a powerful player. You know, he's very strong. He's a north-south type player, straight lines guy that has a physical side to his game, which is something I watched and I really liked, was his willingness to engage. He's very strong and he's powerful. He can play that possession type game in the offensive zone, and when he doesn't have the puck, he can run guys over, and he's not afraid to do that. So I think that combination was pretty impressive, and certainly there's a bet that we can get him back on track from where he was at one point, not only his draft year but his first year pro. So that's something that's now for our coaches and all of our group to try to bring the best out of him. But sometimes a fresh start's good for players like that. And yes, I've known Paul Fisher a long time. He's grown up here in Chicago. I've seen him since he was a kid playing, and hundreds of games over the years. And he went to the U.S. national team, and he was trending really well. He got injured his draft year, so he probably didn't get drafted where his talent level was. But watched him last year as well at Notre Dame. Emerged as a freshman defenseman, and played a pretty big role in that team. And I know he's in the mix for the U.S. World Junior team as well. So his game is very likable player with his skill set as he's a good sized kid. He's got really a combination of everything, and he's got he's young. He's got areas to improve, but also I know him well as a person, and he's a character kid that's going to do everything he can to improve. So it's nice. We're trying to build up our group here, and player development is something that we're spending a lot of time going forward with to make sure that we can find young prospects, but also help them accelerate their progression and development so that they can reach the NHL sooner. So we look forward to working with Paul.
Maybe we just have time for a few more questions here. We'll go to Jeremy Rutherford from The Athletic in St. Louis.
Thank you, Stan. A big picture question here. What was your reaction? You thought that maybe there could be an offer sheet for one player or the other. What was your reaction to seeing two of them at the same time, and what kind of challenge that presented receiving dual offer sheets?
Yeah, well, it was a challenge, Jeremy. I mean, no question. It's not offer sheets in general aren't common, and then having two of them, hit at the same time is certainly not common. So I think as far as my reaction, like I think I just really rolled my sleeves up and got to work. Like once the offer sheets are in, I understand why maybe from the fan or the media perspective, there's a lot of time spent on all those other sort of things. But really, I wasn't tied up in that. I was looking forward. Like we have a decision to make now. We've got a challenge and a puzzle that we have to put together. So, it certainly was a challenge to find the best option. But, when you look at the full picture, I feel good about being able to navigate that the best way possible in this situation and give ourselves some options moving forward.
And a quick follow-up, a lot of people wonder, is there any ill will when something like this happens? Do you see this as the Blues doing business, or how do you view the use of the offer sheet in this situation and moving forward with the league?
Yeah, I think I think you have to separate business and personal. I've known Doug Armstrong a long time. We had a lot of battles over the years when I was in Chicago, and he's still in St. Louis. So, I don't look at it that way. I understand that this is a possibility for every manager to use, and now it's our job to react to it and do what's best for us. So, I think you can't let your personal feelings get in the way of anything like that. We have to have a working relationship with all the managers in the league, and I can intend to do that moving forward.
Next, we'll go to Steven Sandor, Canadian Press, to finish things off.
Thanks for doing this, Stan. Just the question I have is, you said a little bit earlier in this press conference that you want to have the best possible blue line for the stretch run. Does that mean that any current UFAs are off the table right now, or are you still looking at maybe some of the guys who are left around for training camp for October?
I would say nothing is off the table at this point. I think it doesn't do us any good to close any doors right now. I guess what I should have clarified earlier is that we do have some new players that we have to give them an opportunity. Like some of them are signed here for a reason, and Emerson's case, you just traded for him, so we want to give them a chance to show that they can take a step forward and be an asset for us. But also, you know, part of my job is to look at the options that we have, whether it's through additional trades or through free agent players currently in the market. So yeah, I think I intend to do that. I don't know if that's going to come to anything. I think you know, the limitations are still what they are. The salary cap picture is not changing for us, so we've been, you know, careful to make sure that we give ourselves some flexibility moving forward. But yeah, to answer, a quick answer would be yes, we certainly have the capability to talk to players and see if there's anyone that makes sense to bring in.